start with the introduction. Yeah. So, guys, today, this follows just a sec. There are some people in the waiting room. Priya Pathak and Kalash Thakur. I have admitted them. So this is the series of webinars and Zoom sessions that we have been having with very, very senior journalists. Now, Rajdeep was here last week, and Paranjoy is more senior to Rajdeep. He is a veteran as far as economic journalism is concerned. I will tell you his credentials first. Okay. He is from Lamarck's, right? He has gone to St. Stephen's College, studied economics in St. Stephen's College. Then he went to Delhi School of Economics, right? Instead of becoming a lecturer, he chose to become a journalist. He has worked in magazines or papers like Business World and Business India, Telegraph, India Today, right? And he was the former editor of Economic and Political Week, EPW. Now, I don't know how many of you have heard the name of this magazine. It's one of the most prestigious magazine that comes out of India, EPW, right? He is a very well-known author. He has written a book called Gas Wars on the entire natural gas and how people were making money out of it. And it was also dealt with the Ambanis, right? He got sued for it. He has written as a part of a committee made by the Press Council of India. He has written a report on paid news, right? A very mild version of it got released because there was a lot of pressure on Press Council and everybody got a cold feet. But he is one person who is not scared to say what is wrong. And he is not ready to compromise on what he thinks is right? He's a very well-known journalist, and I am proud to present to you today Paranjoy Guha Thakurta. This is the second time he's coming to our university. I wasn't the dean when he had come, and I am thankful to him that he has agreed to come and talk to us and talk to our students. Now, I hope you guys have questions for him. You can ask him anything. You can ask him about economy, because of course he as an economic student and writing about the economy of the country. He's going to talk about economy, and he's also going to talk about how to report post-COVID. So you can ask him anything. I thank you, sir, for being here, and floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Sanjay. Thank you, Seema. Seema and I, we go back as journalists many decades. So I thank all of you. I thank the students of APJ Satya University. I'll be delighted to answer your questions. I'll keep my opening remarks brief. I'll complete what I have to say, hopefully in the next 20 minutes or 25 minutes. And I want to spend more time trying to answer your questions. I presume and I hope you will have some questions for me. Okay, Sanjay, one or two minor clarifications. The person who I'm most indebted to for my decision to become a journalist is Mrs. Indira Gandhi, the late Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Around my last 2 years at the University of Delhi roughly coincided with the emergency. So if anybody wants to know more about it, I could speak about how you compare the period of the emergency, which is really 75 to 77, with what is happening today. That's one point. Secondly, the Ambanis did indeed sue me. They never took me to court. I've been honored and privileged that Mr. Gautam Adani has taken me to court. Not once, there are 3 cases against me at this particular point of time pending. And the last clarification is about that paid news thing. Finally, a diluted version of that report was presented It's called Paid News, How Corruption in the Indian Media Undermines Democracy. But the full report is available. It is available on the website of the Press Council of India. It's all 70 pages, all 34,000 words of it are available. So there was an attempt undoubtedly to prevent its publication, but that did not succeed. I could elaborate on that if any of you are interested. So let me talk a little bit about the economy, and then I'll talk a little bit about journalism in the world post-COVID-19. So the economy in this country is really in a very, 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 very bad shape at present. It's not just the Indian economy, the economy of the world. Different commentators have different points of view, and economists in particular have all different points of view. And so I will just summarize some of the main points. There is a view that the world has not faced the kind of economic crisis ever of the kind it is currently going through. I mean, people compare that to the First World War, earlier calamities, then there was the Great Depression of the 30s, then there was the Second World War, and more recently, about 12 years ago, there was the Great Recession when Wall Street melted down in 2008. Many people believe that unlike all these past crises, which were some of them, you did talk about First World War, you did talk about Second World War, but there were many parts of the world which were relatively insulated from these wars. The difference on this occasion is just about no part of the world has been insulated from the ongoing health emergency and with it, the economic crisis. So that is one important part of the story. The second thing is that this kind of crisis is also something which has not happened before, because we've seen it happen simultaneously, a health crisis and an economic crisis happening together. Now, when you look abroad, there is a consensus, the same in International Monetary Fund and World Bank, which was somewhat circumspect in anticipating the extent of the economic crisis in 2008, are today almost unanimous that the world, instead of growing, is actually, the economies of the world were actually going to shrink. And there is some dispute. Some people say, well, China in 2020 will grow, India in 2020 may grow, even if it grows by a very small percentage. But there are equal number of analysts and economists who would argue that even the economy of China and the economy of India, these are not going to expand. They're going to actually shrink. Why are India and China important? Because these are the two most populous countries on the planet. India and China put together account for roughly 40% of the total population of the world. Now, the other aspect of the economy, and coming specifically to India, before I come to India, let's also look at two other things which are common across the world. One thing that is common is that it's going to widen inequalities. The gap between the rich and the poor, जो अमीर लोग हैं और जो गरीब लोग हैं, इनके बीच जो दुराई है, ये बढ़ जाएगा. So, I mean, it's not that this wasn't happening before. The world was becoming more unequal, but this crisis is going to widen and sharpen economic inequalities. It is often said the rich are becoming richer and the poor are becoming richer. इसमें भी कुछ विवाद है, अलग-अलग अर्थशास्त्री का अलग-अलग राय है. But the point is, even if you look at the last several decades, the poor haven't all become poorer. What is very clear, that the gap between the rich and the poor have widened. That's point one. But what is today completely unanimous, I mean, nobody has any disagreement, that today the gap between the rich and the poor will become wider after COVID-19 and the economic crisis. This is worldwide. Let's come to India. The Indian economy was already slowing down. there were already signs that the Indian economy was not expanding. जिस रफ्तार से भारत का अर्थव्यवस्था, भारतवर्ष का जो GDP है, सकल घरेलू उत्पाद, जिस रफ्तार से बढ़ रहे थे, उस रफ्तार से नहीं बढ़ रहे थे. Now that will worsen. The rate of growth will slow down. There is actually a distinct possibility of negative growth. मतलब negative growth is like an oxymoron. Growth अगर नहीं हुआ, negative growth का मतलब क्या है? मतलब we will actually shrink. The economy, the economic activities in this country will actually shrink. Now, what is unique about India? First, it's the second most populous country. Secondly, about half the population of the country, roughly half, is below the age of 26. हमारे जो आपके जो APJ सत्य विश्वविद्यालय में जितने सारे हमारे जो students आज हैं, इसमें बहुत सारे 26 साल से कम हैं. So the median age of India, that means the number of people, the maximum number of people with the same age is about 27. So India is a very, very young population. So what is of great concern to people in India is joblessness. आपका नौकरी कहाँ से आएगा? And today, joblessness, unemployment has reached a record level, the highest ever. Now, this is not I saying so. If any of you are interested, you please visit the website of CMIE, Center for Monitoring the Indian Economy, Center for Monitoring Indian Economy. And you'll find that they have the data that they have got clearly shows that the unemployment rate has gone up. It is unprecedented. Kabhi, I mean, Bharatvarsh ki zindagi mein, never has it happened. So, what I thought, there are two other points that make India unique. So we've already not been creating enough jobs for our youths. Now things have worsened further. There are another thing that has happened in India, and this again makes India unique, is internal migration. जो हमारे देश के जो प्रवासी मजदूर है, migrant laborers, the number of people who move, especially over the last several weeks, after the last 3 weeks and a little longer, especially since the night of the 24th of March, is unprecedented. बाद में हमें मालूम चलेगा कितने करोड़ों लोग अपने घर छोड़ के और कहीं गया. A very substantial portion of India's population leave their homes and travel long distances for work, for their livelihood, roti roji ke liye. Typically, many of these people move from villages to cities, or they move from certain parts of India, जैसे हमारे देश का जो पूरब, जो से the state where Seema comes from, Assam, the state where I come from, Bengal, Orissa, Jharkhand, Bihar, Chhattisgarh. Where do they go? Many of them go to Punjab, to Haryana, to Western Uttar Pradesh, especially for agricultural work. Where do they go for industrial work? They go to Gujarat, they go to Maharashtra. Where do they go for services work? They go to Karnataka, they go to Kerala. So within states and across states, the kind of internal migration that we see historically in India doesn't take place in most other countries in the world. तो ये अभी और भी बढ़ गया. तो आप देखिए ये जो प्रवासी मजदूर जो पलायन किया, what will happen when buses start running, when trains start running? और क्या लोग चले जाएंगे अपने घर में? Or will they see कि no, we have to be where we can work. In any case, there was no work for us in our village and home. So will they stay back? Will people come back? Now, these are big questions, the answers to which I don't know. My last point on the economy, and maybe Sanjay, with your permission, I could take questions on the economy now and then talk about the media, because we'll divide it into two sections. The last point about the economy that I want to say, and this I feel is criminal neglect on the part of the government. And I hold the government of India largely responsible. ये क्या है? The food grain stocks in India at present, जो गेहूं है, जो चावल है, it is more than 3 times what is required by the country. जो बोलते हैं buffer stocks. We have more than 3 times that amount. But because of accounting reasons, because of the tussle between the government of India and state governments, we are not able to distribute this food free of cost to those who need it the most. The poor, the underprivileged, the weakest section, the migrant laborers. It's terrible, and that's why I say it is criminal. Because I am reminded of a time I heard from my parents the great Bengal famine of 1943. If any of you have seen Satyajit Ray's film Ashoni Shonket, Distant Thunder, you'll know people died of starvation in Bengal not because there was not enough food. There was enough food in the godowns. But people went hungry and people died of starvation because the food didn't reach them, because they were not entitled to that food, because they did not have the money to get the food. I hope I'm wrong, but I fear we are going through something similar. I was very, very troubled and shocked when I heard Ram Vilas Paswan, our Minister for Consumer Food, Civil Supplies, Consumer Affairs, talk to Srinivasan Jain recently on NDTV. You see, this is no time to quibble about accounting. कि कहाँ पे subsidy, कौन subsidy खर्च करेगा? Food Corporation का गोडाउन से एक किलो आपका चावल या गेहूं और कहीं ले जाने के लिए कितना खर्चा होगा? 20 रुपए या 22 रुपया या 25 रुपया? The food is concentrated in a few parts of India because that's where the procurement takes place. That is where the bulk of the food grain stocks are. ये है पंजाब, हरियाणा, पश्चिमी उत्तर प्रदेश. But it is needed the most in states in eastern India, in rural areas. And this is not the time to be quibbling about who pays the subsidy, कौन अनुदान देगा, कहाँ पे किसका खाता में. Food Corporation in India is a government of India company. The food has to be distributed through the state governments, through the agencies of the state government, including the district administration, जो वहाँ पे जो हर जिला में जो वहाँ पे जो वहाँ के जो अधिकारी है, इनके ऊपर निर्भर करते हैं. Now you are saying so and so doesn't have a ration card, so and so needs Aadhaar linked card. This is not the time. एक महामारी के समय से हम लोग जी रहा है. This is a health emergency, an economic emergency, a food crisis. This is the time we have to say, if our Prime Minister Modi ji really believes in Sabke Saath, Sabka Vikas, this is the time for the Food Corporation of India to release its food grain and give it free to those who need it for more. We don't want food riots of the kind we have saw in different parts of the country, in Bengal. I hope our honorable leaders are listening. मैं इतना कह के यहीं पे कुछ समय के लिए मैं रोक रहा हूँ. अगर any of your students, I speak in Bangla too, my Hindi is a little weak, but दोनों अंग्रेजी हिंदी में आप मेरे से सवाल उठा सकते हैं. And after I'm through with the economy, I'll talk to you about the media. Okay. Media after COVID-19.
Right. First, I want to ask all my students, whose Hindi is better, Seema's or Paranjoy's? Secondly, they have already started asking questions. Yes, they are very comfortable in English, so you can answer all the questions in English. They are absolutely perfect, right? So,
Ankita Mishra.
Ankita, first is Nitika Mishra. Nitika.
Okay, sorry.
Nitika Mishra is your question. You want to ask Nitika?
Yes. Hello, sir. Sir, I recently read it's an India Today report that the RBI has unveiled certain measures to deal with COVID-19 to help India's economy deal with it. So, do you think those measures are enough, for India's economy to deal with such a pandemic? And if those are not enough, what, according to you, are measures which should be undertaken by India to deal with the condition that Indian economy is facing right now? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nikita, for the question. I believe that the two sets of measures that were announced by the Reserve Bank of India and the government of India are not adequate. I think much, much more needs to be done. The Reserve Bank of India's measures were initially discriminatory towards the states. Now they are trying to correct the imbalance. And I can suggest that if you want to know in greater detail, I'll suggest some links to some discussions that I've conducted, including one with the senior economic journalist, A.K. Bhattacharya. He explains why that the Reserve Bank of India's measures, while welcome, are inadequate. And also they are somewhat discriminatory towards the states. The states are being expected to bear the load. They have to spend more. They have to distribute the food. They have to provide the money. They have to be given more facilities. और देखिए ये पिछले जो वित्तीय साल है, the GST dues have not been cleared. So the states have to be helped much more than they have so far. So that was the first point. The government of India's measures, I also believe, are inadequate. And let me give you 2 points why I think so. If you look at the total expenditure that the government has proposed so far, it is less than 1% of our GDP. If you exclude the programs which are already part of the budget. So if you look at the additional measures, the additional schemes, हमारा जीडीपी सकल घरेलू उत्पाद का 0.5 या 0.6% है. Now, when you look at a country like America, they are far more economically developed than India. They are spending 10% of their GDP. Other countries are spending much more than we are. This is not the time to think of the fiscal deficit. This is the time for the government to spend much more for the poor. We've had a number of 3 senior economists, 2 Nobel Prize winning economists, Professor Amartya Sen and Professor Abhijit Banerjee, together with the former governor of the Reserve Bank of India, Dr. Raghuram Rajan. They issued a statement recently. You can read it, it's available. Indian Express also published the full statement first. They say that, look, don't quibble. This is not the time to quibble. Will the same family get free food twice? Okay, maybe out of 10, 2 families will misuse the opportunity and get free food twice. But in the process, you're also giving food to 8 out of 10 families who need it. So there will be some inclusion, some exclusion. The government needs to spend much more. So this is my answer in brief. It is not enough to put money in people's accounts. That is important. It is also important to give free essential commodities, cooked food, jo midday meals for the children. If the schools are closed, where is the midday meal? They are suffering the most. The senior citizens, the elderly, the Buzurg Bhakti, the people who are challenged, physically challenged, the people who are suffering from other diseases like cancer, like diabetes, like heart ailments, they are not being adequately taken care of because the entire medical system is focused on COVID. So all these people need greater assistance, and I hope the government of India loosens its purse strings and spends much more, and especially gives more money to those who have to spend, which is at the local level, the district administrations, and at the state level, the state administrations. So okay, that's my answer to you, right, in a nutshell. Yeah.
Okay, one sec, Paranjoy. I want to take this opportunity also to welcome now our Vice Chancellor, Professor Rajas Thankar, our Registrar, Viplav Pandey, and also Mr. Mithilesh Singh, who is from our head office and attached to the office of our Chancellor. Right.
Thank you,
and
sir. Thank you,
thank you, sir. I also, yeah.
Pranam, sir. Naturally.
So, sir, if you want to say, our Vice Chancellor, sir, if you want to say something to welcome.
Firstly, my apology for joining a little late, as there was another webinar going on and I just got free from that, and that only got for a little longer than expected. Having said that, Professor Paranjoy Guha doesn't need any introduction. He's a well-known academic and economist. So I, on my own behalf and behalf of APJ Satya University, welcome you, Paranjoy, and we have heard you so many times in the past, and this would be one more wonderful occasion. So without taking much time, we welcome you once to the campus, and please carry on with your talk. Thank you.
जी धन्यवाद आचार्य राज धनकर जी. मैं आपका कैंपस में नहीं हूँ, मैं अपने घर में बैठा हूँ. ये ऑनलाइन वेबिनार चल रहे हैं. So thank you for giving me this opportunity to interact with your students.
Yeah, Abhi, you can go ahead and ask the question.
Good afternoon, sir. I'm Abhi. So my question is, our finance minister said it was because of the youth of the country that the auto sector was facing the decline. So I want to ask that I mean, what was the base of the statement? I mean, is it real? Were there actual facts to support this statement, or or she just vaguely made the statement just to put blame on someone, as our government always does?
Avni, I honestly have not read such a statement. You can't blame all young people for the problems of one sector. The auto sector had been suffering from a demand contraction for some time now, some months, several months before the COVID problem started. If you look at the figures of SIAM, Society for Indian Automobile Manufacturers, you will see that from around the month of, if I remember correctly, around the month of September, we've seen a steady fall in the demand for all kinds of vehicles, from heavy vehicles, trucks and lorries, to passenger cars and to two-wheelers. Now, you can't blame the youth. Even today, okay, some of the youth are purchasing vehicles, but a lot of the vehicles are purchased by people who are in their middle ages and even elderly people. So I don't think it's got any connection. The reason why the demand for vehicles has come down is because of the economy. You know, when the economic condition is bad, what do people first spend on? They first spend on the essentials. What is the essentials? Their food, their roti kapra makan, what they need, which is important. If they already have a vehicle, or if they already want, I mean, or they will not purchase a new one. If they want to purchase a two-wheeler or something, they wait and watch. They'll still use public transport. So, मेरा जो राय है that I don't think that we can link the youth with the auto sector. The decline in the auto sector was already evident even before COVID-19 happened. Now, there are two questions which are linked, and they are linked to COVID-19 also. What are the steps India could take to deal with this economic crisis after COVID-19? This is from whom? Let me just check. This is...
No. Sir, from my side.
Divya. This is from Divya.
Yeah,
Divya.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, this is, hold on. This is from, sorry, Divya Sinha, yes. And then also...
I think there is an interesting question from Amisha Piplani.
That's correct. I read an article about how COVID-19 is affecting the GDP of all countries, even leading to countries getting negative GDP like South Korea. A report said that within the next trimester, it may lead to other countries like Finland that send out a report that 1/3 of the labor force will be unemployed by the next trimester. And if this elongates till the end of 2020, what will happen to the whole economy? Amisha, मैंने आपका सवाल, I have already answered this question. I agree entirely with you that, you know, as we are saying, this is a worldwide recession, a worldwide problem. And if countries like South Korea, if a country like the US, which is, after all, it may have with 300 million people in a country, in a world with over 7.5 billion people, its share of the population is relatively small, but it is still a large economy. It is one of the largest economies. It depends on how you want to calculate it. In purchasing power parity, China may have overtaken USA, but the US is now, even USA, we are seeing unemployment at a record level. Never before, not even during the Great Recession, have so many people unemployed. Then that gives you an indication of how bad the situation is. Now, you know, I'll try and answer some of the questions by Sanyuk Kulshrestha. What should be the steps to get out of the lockdown so that we do not have to deal with the backlash? And interdisciplinary cooperation, and changes in the economy, and what sectors of the economy are likely to suffer the most, and what are the steps that could be taken. I'll try and answer all these questions, then we can cover more ground quickly.
Yeah.
Firstly, I think the time has come for all of us to realize that we are not spending enough on our healthcare. We are spending very, very, very little. You know, if I give you the statistics, they are startling. We are spending barely 1%, less than 1.5% of our GDP on public healthcare. Even the government's own suggestion is that we should be spending 2.5% of GDP. Other countries spend much more. Even our neighboring countries spend much more. But in 2021, in the union budget, our healthcare budget hardly went up. Now, the World Health Organization says there should be one doctor for every 1,000 patients. In India, we have one doctor for 1,400 patients. The World Health Organization says there should be 3 nurses for every 1,000 patients. We have 1.7 nurses per 1,000 patients. The World Health Organization says that there should be at least 1 hospital bed for every 1,000 people, population. We have 0.7%. So what is happening is that we are not spending enough on healthcare. And I recently, just today, a little while back, I interviewed Dr. Vikram Patel. He's a public health expert. You can see the video on Newsclick, I think, in the next 24 hours or so. He says that we have to change the slogan. He said, Sabka Swasth, Sabka Vikas. That should be the slogan. After COVID-19, we should realize that we have to spend more. The government has to spend more on public health care. No country in the world has been able to progress in educational terms, in economic terms, in scientific terms, unless we spend more on healthcare. Look at a small country like Cuba. When it was in the forefront of helping other countries, while in this COVID crisis. So I think the biggest lesson that we have to take from there, that we must spend much, much more than we are at present on not just healthcare, but also on education. These are big subjects. And the question that was asked is, which are the sectors of the economy that are going to be hurt the most? It's already obvious. The transportation sector, the hospitality sector, the retail sector, they have all very, very been badly affected. And which are the sections that are going to be hurt? Of course, the small and medium enterprises, the cottage industries, they have been badly hurt. So these are the sectors of the economy which have been very, very badly hurt.
Paranjoy, can you just tell them a little bit about paid news?
Oh,
it's not the huge thing, very short, so that they will understand we are doing paid news.
Wait a minute. I want you, Paranjoy. This is a very important thing what you talked about, Ramvilas Paswan talk, right? That it will cost us 46,000 crores to transfer all the, the grain that's there in FCI to make it available for all the people. Now, my question to you is, this 46,000 crores is only coming from the government's coffers. And this is the time when each and every life has to be saved. You can't allow people to starve. And in Sector 53, right where we live, people are committing suicide because they don't have enough to eat. Now, how can a government minister talk about that we are not ready, states have to spend money, government can't, center cannot spend all the money? What is going on? And why is nobody questioning this?
Sanjay, I use strong language and I'm repeating. It is the inaction on the government is criminal. It is criminal on the part of the government to justify. What is 46,000 crores? RBI is saying we are giving additional liquidity of 1,60,000 crores. Nirmala Sitharaman is saying we are giving a package of 1,70,000 crores. Even if it is 3 times 46,000 crores, what is important? That this wheat should remain in the godowns of the Food Corporation of India, that it should be rats and rodents should be eating it? No. This is the time this food should be transported to parts of the country and to those people who need it the most. And I repeat, it needs to be distributed free. And the government and the local agencies and NGOs, everybody has to come together to make sure that the chawal hai, jo gehu hai, this is made into cooked food. So Sanjay,
I I will question you as a representative of Indian media, because you are still working as a media person.
Yes.
What is our media doing? Why aren't they creating enough hue and cry that this should happen? Why are we still talking about how Muslims or Hindus or whoever it is responsible to bringing this virus into the country and spreading the virus? Why isn't the media doing what it's supposed to do? And this is how we come to the next section of the talk, media.
Sanjay, I completely agree with you. The media is just not doing enough. And I'm going to bring in the point about Seema. Let me just summarize 2 or 3 main points. Why is the media not asking the most important questions to those who are in positions of power and authority? This is instead, they are trying to divert attention by talking about Hindu, Muslim, Tablighi Jamaat, everything other than issues, in my opinion, that matters. Now, again, let me take a few steps back and talk about the big picture, what is happening in the world. We are seeing that there are a few digital monopolies who are dominating this, what people read, what people hear, what people watch. Since the Great Recession 12 years ago, expenditure on advertising has either come down or remained where it has been, or hardly gone up. Now, this is an international trend, and people are maybe not that they're reading less, but they're not reading on pieces of paper, they're reading on screens, on their handheld devices, on their desktops, on their laptops, whatever. But the point is, people are not willing to pay for what they read, what they hear, what they watch. Who pays the writer? Who pays the camera person? Who pays the illustrator? You know, the entire generation of people who are sitting here with me on this program, unlike you, unlike Seema, unlike me, unlike Professor Dhankar, we used to go and pay for music that we bought. We would buy vinyl discs and audio cassettes and CDs. Today's generation doesn't want to pay a single paisa for the music they hear. Who pays the musician? They will spend tens of thousands of rupees or huge amounts of money to go to a concert. But why are they not willing to pay the musician, the singer? This is because we've had a complete paradigm change in the way the media is consumed. So in this scenario, we are seeing very, very major changes happening across the world. What is that? One of the what we are seeing is that the digital monopolies are dominating this world. We used to have a situation where we used to say 30 years, the internet is just around 30 years old. The internet became really big in the last 15 years. It was said the internet would not only provide information, it would not only provide knowledge, it would empower people, it would lead to democracy being stronger. Instead, we are seeing the internet being dominated by a few corporations. There are 2 big guys here. One is Alphabet, which is Google, YouTube, and the Android operating system. The second company is Facebook, which is not just Facebook, but WhatsApp and also Instagram. Then comes Apple and Amazon and Alibaba and Netflix and so on and so forth. This is a subject of a longer discussion, but the short point that I want to make is that today we have a situation in India when, because people are not willing to pay for what they want to be a quality content, you get fake news. As far as India is concerned, one of the reasons why you have fake news, you have 90 crore people in India who are eligible to vote, and you have 40 crore users of WhatsApp. As your former colleague Ravish Kumar used to say, large numbers of people did not have the privilege of being educated in a good educational institutions. Unlike the students of APJ Satya University, large numbers of young people are getting educated in WhatsApp ka Vishwavidyalaya. They're getting fake news every day. They're getting hatred. They're getting trash. Come to the point that you made. You know, this whole thing about Hindu-Muslim thing. I mean, not today. For the last several years, you have been getting these WhatsApp messages. Not every Muslim is a terrorist, but every terrorist is a Muslim. हर मुसलमान आतंकवादी नहीं है मगर हर आतंकवादी मुसलमान. This kind of half truth, lies, hatred is being spewed. Unfortunately, a large section of the mainstream media, and I can name names to you, I have no hesitation in naming names to you, they are contributing to the toxic atmosphere that is present. But I'll name names if you want me to. I have no hesitation. Let them sue me. I don't care.
No, that's
Seema,
okay.
the
That's
point
okay.
you made about paid news. Again, this is something that has been going on for some time now. The difference between an advertisement and what is supposed to be factually correct, balanced information has disappeared. What has happened is in India, all the mainstream media organizations have become excessively dependent on the government and government bodies and the ruling political party for the bulk or lot of advertising revenue. The Bharat Sarkar, the Rajya Sarkars, and especially in the run-up to the elections, the Bharatiya Janata Party, they have been the biggest advertisers. So he who pays the piper calls the tune. इन लोग से आप पैसा ले रहे और फिर इनका गुणगान आप गा रहे. Can you call yourself a democracy if as a journalist you cannot ask tough questions to those who are in power? Look at the kind of interviews that have been given by our Honorable Prime Minister Shri Narendra Modi in the run-up to the elections. I'll name them for you. All the people who've been given interviews. Look at the questions they've asked. Sir, आप रात भर जगे रहते हैं. आप 24 घंटे में कितने समय आपको सोने का मिलता है? आप मुख्यमंत्री से रात 2:30 बजे बात करते हैं. And there's sometimes non-journalists like a Canadian gentleman called Akshay Kumar who also gets a chance to interview the Prime Minister. He says, आप आम कैसे खाते हैं? कौन सा आम आपको पसंद है? So, is this journalism or is this public relations? Is this advertising? So I'm saying you cannot call yourself a democracy if the media does not ask questions which are critical of whoever is in power. आज नरेंद्र मोदी हमारा प्रधानमंत्री है, 10 साल मनमोहन सिंह जी हमारा प्रधानमंत्री, जो भी सत्ते में है, इनसे आप सवाल उठाइए, सख्त सवाल उठाइए, ऐसे गुडी सवाल मत उठाइए. The sad part of the story is that the media has played a huge role in spreading the communal virus in this country. और जैसे सीमा, ये जो पेड न्यूज का जो बीमारी है, it has been going on for some time now and it has become bad. Today as a viewer, whether you're on WhatsApp or whether you're reading or watching a newspaper and what you're watching, if you cannot distinguish between an advertisement and news, then that's terrible. That, in my opinion, is very, very terrible. And it's contributing to the degeneration of our society. And I hope all the young people who are listening to me, if some of them are in journalism, they will remember that you are remembered as a democracy because you ask questions. North Korea में सवाल नहीं उठाते हैं. और मैं एक हमारा पुराने एक कहावत है, ये कह के इसके बाद हम जितने मर्जी आप सवाल उठाइए. ये आप बुरा मत मानिए, पत्रकार और कुत्ते के साथ में कुछ तुलना का करना चाहता हूँ. I want to compare dogs and journalists. एक कहावत है ना, dog bites man, no news. अगर कुत्ता आदमी को काटता है, ये खबर नहीं बनता है. अगर if man bites dog, अगर आदमी कुत्ते को काटते हैं, तो ये बहुत बड़ा खबर हो जाता है. मगर इसमें मैं थोड़ा कुछ और जोड़ना चाहता हूँ. अगर कुत्ता आज प्रियंका चोपड़ा को काट देते हैं, या अमिताभ बच्चन को काट देते हैं, या इवांका ट्रम्प को काट देते हैं, या मोदी जी को काट देते हैं, तो ये भी खबर हो जाएगा, मैं कहता हूँ. तो इट इज नॉट जस्ट it matters who the dog bites. दूसरी बात है कि देखिए अलग अलग कुत्ता होता है. हम लोग कहते हैं मीडिया इज सपोज्ड टू बी वॉच डॉग्स ऑफ सोसाइटी. अलग अलग वॉच डॉग्स होता है जी. रात को 3 बजे आपका कुत्ता भौंकना शुरू कर देते हैं, मगर वो चोर भाग जाते हैं. चोर को मालूम नहीं है इस कुत्ता को सिर्फ काटना नहीं आता ना, भौंकना आता है. The dog can only bark and not bite. At least the dog is paid its role. So the watchdog role. मगर बहुत सारे हमारे देश के पत्रकार आज लैब डॉग बन गए हैं. जो रवीश कहते हैं ना, गोदी मीडिया. ये गोदी में चुपचाप बैठ जाते हैं, पूंछ हिलाते हैं. और इफ द लैब बिलोंग्स टू एन इम्पोर्टेंट पर्सन, कोई राजनेता है, कोई बड़ा पूंजीपति है, कोई बड़ा सरकारी ऑफिसर है, कोई मिलिट्री जनरल है,
Paranjoy, hello.
आखिरी चीज मैं कहना चाहता हूँ, ये जो अच्छे कुत्ते भी होते हैं जो कहते हैं इंटेलिजेंट डॉग, जो आपने सेंट बर्नार्ड का नाम भी जरूर सुना होगा, तो they help people out. You heard about dogs that help a visually challenged person across the street. You have heard of dogs that been able to sniff out drugs and explosive substances. So just as there are dogs and dogs, there are journalists and journalists. Unfortunately, the lap dogs seem to be dominating today, and not the watchdogs.
Sanjay.
Yes, Professor Dhankar.
Can I ask a question?
Yes, go ahead. Go ahead.
Now, given your thoughts about politics and media, let me ask you this dimension. Having such a large number of TV channels, and all of them are in a highly competitive TRP business, do you think that our politics and the functioning of these TVs have become highly bipartisan, and in this process, the true journalist is dead? That is one. Second question is more on economy. I know you are such a well-read person on world economy, and you said that many sectors will not grow, particularly transport, retail, entertainment, sorry, not entertainment, but hospitality, and so on and so forth. All these three sectors contribute very, very heavily in our economy, as you know. And then it is forecasted that this year our economy would grow something like 1.79%. Understandable. The world economy will go into recession. I mean, -6%, -8%, -10%, you name it, the bigger countries. And then, surprising to me is the news that next year we will grow by 7.4%. I mean, I wonder how on earth our exports will go down because major countries will not be able to export. How we will be able to grow by 7.4% next year? These are my two questions, if you can please address.
Okay, thank you, Professor Dhankar, for asking me these questions. I'll take your question on the economy first. If you grow at -5% this year, and next year you grow at 2%, then you are actually, your growth has been 7% because you're compensating -5 to 2. Statistical jugglery aside, I think those who are making these predictions, they are being excessively optimistic. वो ज़्यादा आशावादी है, और मेरे को तो नहीं लगता है कि इसके ऊपर इस तरीका से आप जैसे कह रहे 7.5 या 7.5% हमारे अर्थव्यवस्था में सुधार आएगा. I personally think that is being excessively optimistic. I seriously believe that the economic recovery will be slow, and as you rightly pointed out, these sectors of the economy which have been badly hit, it will take them quite some time to recover. So personally, my view is this recession is going to linger for some time, and there will be growth, but we are not sure at what time it will come. आपका जो पहला क्वेश्चन सवाल आपने उठाया, इस विषय के ऊपर आप एक बार आप बुलाइए आपका यूनिवर्सिटी में, आपका सबका पूरा हर डिपार्टमेंट के लोगों को बताएंगे कि ये जो टीआरपी, टेलीविजन रेटिंग पॉइंट, ये क्यों लोगों को एकदम धोखा दे दिया. It's sham, it's a scam, it's shameful. मगर आज इतना समय नहीं है बारीकी से. I'll have to explain why it is so, but I completely agree with you. Today the media is shaping politics. There are not just hundreds of television channels, sir. In 1991, we had one broadcaster called Doordarshan. The first non-public sector broadcaster came in 1994. Today, we are the only country in the world where the government of India, the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting, has given licenses, uplinking and downlinking permission to somewhere in the region of 900 television channels, of which about somewhere between 350 and 400 channels call themselves news and current affairs. मगर आप क्या देख रहे हैं चैनल में? वो खबर है, वो करंट अफेयर्स है. इससे पहले आप नाग नागिन का शादी देख रहे थे, आप भूत प्रेत का कहानी देख रहे थे. आज आप क्या देख रहे हैं? आप हिंदू मुसलमान का मारपीट देख रहे हैं. हाँ, आप पुराने जमाने का गाना सुन रहे हैं. आप बहुत अच्छा, आप रामायण महाभारत देखिए, इसमें कोई, I have no objection, but I am saying today the media is part of the problem of Indian society. And I completely agree with you that some of us who consider ourselves journalists, not because we are martyrs, हम अपने आप को ऐसा नहीं कि हम शहीद अपने आप को, मैं अपना काम कर रहा हूँ जी. हम जब भारतवर्ष में जब आपातकालीन समय थे 1977 में, इंदिरा गांधी चुनाव हार गए थे, उनसे सवाल उठाया था एक बार कि what was your biggest mistake during the emergency? उन्होंने कहा प्रेस सेंसरशिप. She herself said press censorship. आज हम घूम फिर के वहीं पे चला गए. इंदिरा गांधी लोगों को जेल में, पत्रकार लोगों को जेल के अंदर डाल दिया. आज journalists who are taking positions which are not favorable to the government, they have been financially squeezed. ये एक बहुत बड़ा समस्या है और बहुत बड़ा प्रॉब्लम है. इस विषय के ऊपर मैं एक पूरा किताब लिख सकते हैं और हम लोग लिखेंगे भी, और हम कोशिश कर रहे हैं. देखिए, if the right to free expression dies, democracy dies. हर नागरिक, भारतीय नागरिक का एक मौलिक अधिकार है. It is a fundamental right of every citizen. अभिव्यक्ति का स्वतंत्रता, freedom of expression. इसका मतलब ये नहीं है मैं मानहानि कर सकता हूँ, मैं झूठा खबर फैला सकता हूँ. This is, if that freedom of expression goes, then we cannot call ourselves a democracy. So देखिए, if I may move on to some of the questions that have been raised by some of the students, they are very, very good questions. And may I, Sanjay, with your
yes, I think Sabiha's question is very good, related to what you were talking about. That some of the top news channel owners are extremely rich, but still they pander to communalism. Will you attribute it just to greed?
Sir, it is greed, stupidity, and greed and stupidity is terrible. But what is worse, I think sometimes it is even evil. Yes, Seema, you hit the right. What did you say?
Sometimes it's because of ED, they're scared.
Of course they are scared. They are very, very scared.
That's the big thing.
ED, Income Tax Department, Aikar Vibhag, I can give you a long list of
CBI as well.
CBI, हाँ जी हाँ.
CBI, Income Tax, and ED.
The law enforcing agencies have become weapons. They have weapons against the political opponents of the government. See, what is in saying that, okay, that right before announcing the lockdown, Narendra Modi met with the top news executives and urged them to publish inspiring and positive stories about the efforts of the government. My take on that. Please read that article which has been written by Sagar. He met all these people who spoke. Yes, if the government is doing something right, good. But to praise the government is the job of the government's advertising and public relations department. It's the job of the supporters of the Bharatiya Janata Party and the NDA. But the job of the media is to tell the government how you can be better, how you can ensure that your schemes and your programs are more effective. It is not your job to be that of the advertising agency, or the public relations firm. That's the first point. Now, this was the question from Arush Tandon. Srishti Singh has said that the government is unable to identify important work, which department should spend money, feeding migrants. The government has to make its priorities. As Sanjay and I earlier discussed, the first priority, and this is what the government itself is saying, nobody should go hungry. Nobody should go hungry. This is the right to life. It's a debate as to whether it is more important than the right to free expression, but the right to life is the most important and fundamental right. तो आप देखिए, आप सरकार को बताइए कि कोई भूखा नहीं है. You have been reading stories. One of the most heart-rending stories I read was about a man who sold his mobile to get a few thousand rupees to pay for his children and his wife's meal, and then he committed suicide. And then the authority says he was mentally imbalanced. I mean, look, do you want this kind of, to live in this kind of a society which is so insensitive? हमारे जो संवेदनशीलता क्या हम खत्म हो गया?
I think a very important question has come from Shelja. Shelja is Professor Shelja Nair.
Some pointers on how to cover economic news. What are the attributes of a good financial journalist?
Yes.
Some of the top news journalists are extremely rich, but they pander to communalism.
That we have a question.
Sabia Farhad.
Yeah.
Somebody named India TV. Therefore, I can name them some other time. You want names? Come and meet me. I'll give you everybody's name. I'll identify them by name, and you can quote me. Not on the record, or not off the record, on the record, I will tell you. Now, Ms. Shailaja Nair, you said what pointers on how to cover economic news. The pointers are all good news persons have to be careful with facts, always be balanced in the reportage, get different points of view. Doesn't mean it's a false equivalence. You know, the government recently told the Supreme Court that you should not allow any reportage of COVID-19 unless it is vetted by the government. Now, the Supreme Court didn't agree on this point. But the point is, suppose you are asking a particular person, why in this hospital are there inadequate PPEs, personal protection equipment? And what do you do if the government doesn't answer you in the next 24 hours? Then you have to report, said, I reached out, but I got no response. And you can update your story if you get a response. So I think the pointers are, whether it's economic news, whether it's political news, whether it's news about healthcare, they are straight. The yardsticks, the pointers are exactly the same. The truth, balance, fairness, all that is important. But most importantly, remember, in a democracy, you know, news is what someone somewhere wishes to suppress. You have to dig that out. Today, what people want to put out to you is advertising and public relations. Get the truth out, get the news out. I recently interviewed Ravish Kumar, and he said that, look, what is important is the news that has got buried. The news that has been made dead, that is the information. It's not just the fake news that is being put out on WhatsApp. It's not just the toxicity that is being spread by certain television channels and their anchors, their well-paid anchors, their suited, booted anchors. It's not just that. What is more important is today we don't have enough journalists, we don't have enough reporters, we don't have any financial resources to pay these journalists to dig out, to investigate, to tell people the truth. And remember, this has got nothing to do with politics. Even the most ardent supporters of the government, they face problems of employment, problems of jobs, problems of how to pay the fees of their school children. If the media cannot act as a bridge between those who know and those who do not know, then the media is failed in its duties, in its obligations to be the fourth estate. As your Vice Chancellor, Professor Thakur, pointed out, then journalism is dead. A large section of journalism today is already dead. We don't want the rest of them to die. We don't want the students who are here to die, to be considered that they are not fulfilling their obligations and their duties, and as true members of the fourth estate. So
post-COVID-19 scenario for these young students who will step or want to get into the media sector, or something like corporate communication or advertising, what is the industry likely to be?
Look, the industry is in there is a huge problem. And I'm saying something to you in your presence, in presence of Professor Thakur. There'll be fewer students who will opt for this course next year than the number who've done this year. Because the students will be able to know that job opportunities. Look at what's happened. Today, large numbers of media organizations, I can give you a long list of them. Times of India, Hindustan Times, News Nation, Dainik Bhaskar, they're downsizing. Quint. They're asking Indian Express, they're telling journalists to take the salary cuts. Earlier, this was happened in NDTV. This was happening in ABP. So we are seeing that, and I've recently interviewed Shekhar Gupta of the Editors Guild, who heads the print on this, and you are welcome to see these interviews. We talk precisely about this. Has COVID-19 become an excuse to throw journalists out of their jobs, to reduce their salaries? Regretfully, it is happening. Yes, the media is in a crisis. I mean, Times of India, it used to be what, 40 pages? Now it's down to 16 pages. But the crisis is going a little deeper. If you are in advertising, if you are in public relations, your choices are made. Mr. X or Miss Y or company A is paying you money to advertise their product, their service, or give a particular message. You don't have any other choice. You have opted for that profession. Fine, I have no problem with those who opt for a career in advertising, in marketing, in public relations. There's nothing wrong. But if you want to be in journalism, then you have to have the guts to be able to ask those right questions, the tough questions, the critical questions. So you have to make those choices about what kind of a dog you want to be, lap dog or watchdog or guide dog. What repercussions Indian students studying abroad will have to face due to COVID-19 outbreak globally? Yes, they're all in a bad shape, but we've been kind to some of our NRIs, and we've been also kind to our RNIs, that is the resident non-Indians. We are not being so kind to those who walk and those who ride bicycles. We need to be kind.
I knew you were going there. I knew you were going there.
The AsiaNet News and Media One, why they were suddenly taken off air for 48 hours. Again, it's a big subject. We can talk about that. But the government should not use its powers to censor indirectly. That's all I can say. Sometimes people believe news just because it validates their so-called opinion. Even when you give them facts and explain to them that it's fake news or that it's news to spread hatred, they still continue to forward the same information out. How are young journalists and budding journalists, how can we stop this? A very, very, very good point. Very good question, Ms. Mishra. You know, this is called, the technical word for it is confirmation bias. We only like to hear. And let me tell you that the big media barons, the digital monopolies, not the media barons, the digital monopolies reinforce this confirmation bias. So we only get to hear what we like to hear. So we live in what is called an echo chamber. That should not be. You should diversify. You should listen. If you have an argument, if you have an opinion, and if you have the facts and the analysis to support that argument, you should be willing to listen to those who have a different point of view. So what the social media, what these digital monopolies and the algorithms do sometimes is they reinforce this confirmation bias. So I would suggest that you be careful about it. Try and get viewpoints of different kinds from different people and then arrive at your own conclusion. Now, I have co-authored a book called The Real Face of Facebook in India. It looks at how the social media has been converted into a propaganda weapon. Now, this is, this is happening even as we are talking. Now, what we are seeing is that we have to struggle very hard. You know, we are living in a surveillance state. Two things are happening across the world. One is about geopolitics and geoeconomics. You know, at a time when the world needs to cooperate the most, we are becoming more insular. But as far as the media is concerned, across the world, is that governments are seeking to intrude on your privacy, to curtail your access to information of different kinds in the name of containing fake news. This is a subject, you go to the website of the IPI, the International Press Institute, go to the website of the ICJ, the CPJ, the Committee for Protection of Journalists, and you will find there are important statements which show how in the name, this emergency powers, the emergency legislation is being misused. You do not want the medicine, the cure to be worse than the disease. That is unfortunately what has also happened. So we have to be careful on that score as well. I see there's
One,
been
one question from Mithilesh Singh. Mithilesh ji, don't you think this is the most polarizing global pandemic in world history? Why this disease has been so
I
popular?
completely agree with you, Mithilesh. We are living through times that we've never experienced before. I'm 64 years old. I guess I'm old or older than your fathers, most of your parents. I learned from my parents that the decade of the 40s in Bengal, they were Bengalis, they came from East Bengal. They went through terrible times. 3 or 4 incidents that happened. And I don't know whether what we are going to see can be compared to them. But first was the Great Bengal Famine, as I mentioned at the beginning of this class. There was food, but people were starving. Number 2, there were the great riots, the Hindu-Muslim riots before the partition of the country. Bengal and Punjab saw the worst of those riots. And then there was the Second World War, which ended in 1945. So those years from the 1943 to 1947 were tumultuous times. I fear, I apprehend that we are going through times of that kind, that this is perhaps the most polarizing and turbulent and world-changing development that I'm seeing in my lifetime, and possibly, and I hope you will see in your lifetime.
There is
Sanjay,
one last question.
yes,
If you can take
please.
it. Sabiha's question is there. Tetlumbe has been arrested for Bhima Koregaon.
Yes.
How do you expect your students to make these choices?
All right. Okay, Sabiha. आप लैपडॉग बनने चाहते हैं या वॉच डॉग बनेंगे? आज आनंद तेलतुंबे, गौतम नवलखा, सुधा भारद्वाज और भी ऐसे बहुत सारे लोग हैं. They are social workers, they are journalists, they are activists. I sincerely believe that they have been targeted because you can call them urban Naxalites, you can call them Tukre gang, you can call them anything you like. But I do believe that we are really living today in this country, a country where we are become, those who are in positions of power and authority have become extremely intolerant. They are extremely intolerant to those who have a point of view, have an opinion which is different from theirs. So I think it's sad and we have to fight against it. You as students, you have to make your choice. There are certain choices you have to make. You have to listen not just to your inner conscience, what your conscience tells you. You have to make those choices as a human being. I can't make those choices for you. I can only provide you information. I can only give you suggestions. Now, there are Amisha Piplani. She writes that in Ravish Kumar's book, The Free Voice, he talks about the things he faced, including becoming a journalist, which includes him talking about only laptop media being safe in the country. He then proceeded to narrate the criticism he faces because he wants to put the truth out. What can we as budding journalists do to make sure we reach that level where we can be strong enough to put the truth out? It's a tough call. It's a difficult decision. It involves sacrifices. It involves hardships. It involves a lot of difficulties. At one level, it's very easy for us to say in every profession of life, we have to struggle. Of course, we have to struggle. But today, when you are faced with a regime which is intolerant towards criticism, today, when we are in a situation where the government is, out to suppress the voices of its critics, where the government is financially squeezing those that don't agree with them, life has become even more tougher. I wish you all the best. There have been some more questions about.
I think we must take the registrar's question because it deals with economy. Don't you think the economy needs a strategy which will be a trade-off between the investment during the COVID period to prevent the damage and further the investment required to pump the economy post-COVID, particularly if the situation lasts long?
Sir, the problem, Viplavji, with the Indian economy has there been not enough investments. This is a problem that has been going on for some time now. Because we haven't had inadequate investments, that investment has not created jobs for the youth. I do seriously believe that we need to invest much, much more. And we need to invest not just in the physical infrastructure. That means bijli, sarak, pani. We need to invest in the social infrastructure the most, especially healthcare and education. And we need those investments for future generations to come. I think without that, we will be in a worse situation. We won't be leaving behind an India which will be better than the India that our parents lived in. So I do believe, and what you say, that we need to spend a lot more. And personally, I'm not concerned about the deficit, about the fiscal deficit. The government of India has the power to print notes. Okay, not directly, indirectly through the Reserve Bank of India. It can incur a deficit. But if that deficit is not spent properly, then you have problems. So the question I have is, I'm not a prisoner of this whole fiscal deficit and how we need to adhere to the Fiscal Responsibility and Budget Management Act, FRBM Act. I personally don't think we should become a slave to those numbers. Ki fiscal deficit should be 3% of GDP or 2.5%. I don't think so. The issue is, how well do we invest? To me, that is the big question. And I do believe that even if we incur the deficit, we need to be able to invest it in well. You want me to take the question from Arush Tandon?
On Siddharth, you can take your friend, Siddharth Varadarajan, absolutely.
Haji.
Question.
The thing is, I want to talk a little bit about the revenue model while talking about Siddharth, because we haven't talked about it. You know, so if the advertising-driven revenue model of media organizations has got broken, that you read a newspaper for 3 or 4 rupees, because if the company concerned, say Bennett Coleman Company Limited, would be spending 10 times that amount of money, then that model is no longer there. But the new models are tough, whether it be subscription model, paywall model. Wire is one of those. They're looking at crowdfunding model and philanthropy driven model. So that is whether these kinds of model, this kind of journalism, where it's not so easy to monetize the content that you put out on the net, how we'll have to see how these models can move ahead in the world. This was a problem earlier, and this has become an even a bigger challenge in the post-COVID environment that we are living in. Siddharth Varadarajan was summoned, FIR was lodged. One part of what he wrote was factually correct, that after the lockdown was announced on the evening of the previous evening on the 23rd, and it became effective from the 24th, 24th and 25th. On the 25th morning, the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh attended a religious ceremony at Ayodhya. That's factually correct. Where the wire went wrong was it issued a statement saying that the Chief Minister Yogi Adityanath had issued a statement saying Bhagwan Ram will take care of the COVID-19 problem. But that was not Yogi Adityanath. That was the statement made by Acharya Paramhans. Then they corrected that statement. Now, the question is, after the correction was made, was it such a big crime that 2 first information reports be lodged in Ayodhya, earlier known as Faizabad? Was it so important that a vehicle of policemen at this time of the country's situation should travel about 700 kilometers to serve a notice to Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan at his home, violating all social distancing norms? You expect others to maintain social distancing? You are unhappy with what happened with the Tablighi Jamaat, but you have these 6-7 cops who come 700 kilometers to serve a notice on Mr. Siddharth Varadarajan. Later on, they agree, yes, you can send your reply by email. So what was all this hoo-ha about? I think it was because the reason was that the wire has been taking consistently critical stands against the government. The media advisor to the Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh put out a tweet saying, "Aapko abhi crowd fund karne hain, logo se bheek mangna padega, दान लोगों से दान लेके आप अभी आपके खिलाफ जो मानहानि का जो आपका जो केसेस आएगा वो लड़िए." So effectively, This kind of, to me, this kind of a tweet by the media advisor to the chief minister is equally significant. So I think it all falls into a pattern of how this particular government is.
On that note, sir, on that note, thank you so much. I would request Professor Rajesh Dhankar to kindly thank Paranjoy for having given us this much of time. VC sir?
Yes, well, of course, I wish I could have attended the full session, as I said in my at the outset, but it has been very refreshing and very intellectually satisfying thoughts, Paranjoy, that you have shared with our faculty and staff, students. I do know, you know, I mean, see, basically, the country is kind of swayed away and mixed up. And I think large number of people are not able to think clearly. And I'm also 65 probably, and I have seen all kinds of, you know, right from early Mrs. Gandhi and later on other issues. And I'm only giving a benefit of doubt that at the end of the day, we want our country to grow, society to be better off. And if this kind of environment, which you were very critical of, you know, we have also grown over the years as an academic, you know, being very critical. But I think the time has also come for us to realize that if this country has to move forward, a number of people have to come above the poverty line, then we need a kind of a governance and a leader who at least can take us forward. I know no system is perfect, no governance is perfect. Even in the US and the West, there are a lot of criticism of those governments. But to me, I'm willing to accept sufferings to some extent because I can afford to suffer, provided, and I'm underlining it, provided the people living in miseries and on margins, if their life can become better off, and I don't mean better off in terms of, no, they have some goodies here and there, but their real lives become better off. The children get education, they get better health facilities, they get better roads, farmers get better irrigation system, better prices for their agriculture produce, and so on and so forth. In that sense, I'm saying if the country would become better off by a given kind of governance system, then I'm giving a benefit of doubt to this generation, to myself, that let us bear it for a while. I know there are always issues on both sides, and we can articulate and debate it, but it's things are very mixed up at the moment, and given the past history of our country, how we have suffered miserably, and we didn't have much investment even in the past in the social sector. Amartya Sen and others have been talking why we could not invest more in education and health, and that's why we are poor. And I agree with that. But now the point is, the money is limited from where you get it. If you borrow from World Bank and others, then you have a debt trap situation. But I fully agree with you that the key point is, if you are poor, it is all the more necessary how you spend your rupee. So fiscal deficit may be allowed to grow, but how do we spend it? So with these words, may I thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with our students and faculty members. Thank you, Paranjoy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Paranjoy. Thank you for taking so much of time, and I'm sure our students have really benefited out of this talk. Mitlesh, you want to say something, 2 words?
No, I just really want to thank you. I have been his fan. Being an alumnus of JNU, I just wanted to know one thing. Is he still accepted in JNU?
Sir, JNU, I was a teacher in JNU.
I know, sir, I was.
For only for a short period of time, sir.
So
I am honored and privileged that the Indian Institute of Management in Ahmedabad, I've been teaching regularly every year, continuously for the last 15 years. I also teach at the IIM in Shillong. I also I had taught at the IIM in Kolkata. And there are a few other institutions, including APJ Satya University, who still
JNU needs you more.
engages with me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sanjay, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you, Professor Dhankar, for giving me
Thank
this
you.
opportunity. Thank you, students also.
Thank you so much.
And,
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Yeah,
everyone.
you can write to me at paranjoy@gmail.com, or you can visit my website, PARANJOY, paranjoy.in. You can get to know about my professional work. Thank you so much.